Welcome, everyone, to today's deep dive. It's a fascinating topic, I think, and maybe a little bit unsettling, too. We're going to be talking about xenophobia, and you guys send in some really interesting stuff. A lot of different material, actually, covering everything from ancient history to modern-day pandemic. So it seems like you're really interested in getting to the bottom of this. Not just what xenophobia is, but how it's shown up across time, how it affects us psychologically, and maybe even what we can do about it.
It really is fascinating. Xenophobia, it's not just some modern thing. It's been around forever. It's woven throughout all of human history, and it always seems to be tied to power dynamics and social structures, and even our own instincts as human beings. We're going to be exploring how this fear has played out in different contexts, from ancient civilizations to the globalized world we live in today.
Okay, so let's unpack this whole thing. Let's start with the basics.
Yeah.
What exactly is xenophobia? It's got to be more than just disliking someone because of their accent.
Right.
Or, feeling a little uncomfortable around customs that are unfamiliar to us.
Right. Yeah, definitely the xenophobia. At its core, it's a fear or dislike of foreigner, or anything that seems foreign or strange.
Yeah.
The thing is, this fear, it's irrational. It's important to remember that everyone experiences unfamiliarity differently.
Right.
What might make one person curious could make another person uneasy. But xenophobia goes beyond simple discomfort. It's about prejudice and hostility and discrimination that comes from fear, and it's often tied to a sense of threat, real or imagined.
Right. And you mentioned this fear being woven throughout history. I was thinking about how even the ancient Greeks, who are known for all this intellectual and cultural stuff, even they had this strong in-group, out-group mentality. Basically, anyone who wasn't Greek was labeled a barbarian.
Yeah, the ancient world was a very different place. Travel was hard, it was dangerous, communication was limited. Different groups were often competing for resources. So in that context, being wary of outsiders wasn't necessarily irrational. But the Greeks, they took it a step further. They thought that their culture and their way of life was better. They viewed those barbarians as uncivilized, and they often portrayed them in their art and literature as savage, uncultured, even monstrous.
So it wasn't just about being cautious. It was more about asserting their own dominance. Cultural. It's amazing to see how those patterns just keep repeating throughout history. Like the Romans, they had this vast empire, but they also had some deep anxieties about certain groups, especially the Germanic tribe.
It's interesting, right? Even the Romans, with their huge and diverse empire, they still had this problem with xenophobia. Historians have found Roman texts that talk about these Germanic tribes in really negative ways. Savage, uncivilized, a threat to their order and virtue. And this wasn't just some abstract fear. It actually influenced their military strategy and border policies.
It's kind of ironic, though, because those barbarian groups, they actually contributed to the fall of the Roman Empire in the end. It's like their fear ended up becoming a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yeah, irony. It's a big theme in history. It shows us that xenophobia, even though it comes from fear, it can lead to actions that actually make things less stable and less secure. When you're always seeing outsiders as enemies, when you're building walls instead of bridges, you're actually creating the perfect conditions for conflict and instability.
Okay, so moving on from togas and gladiators, let's jump to the Middle Ages. The Crusades are a pretty clear example of religious xenophobia, don't you think?
For sure. The Crusades were really complex. It was religious fervor mixed with political ambition. And yeah, definitely, a deep-seated fear and mistrust of the other, especially Muslim. They believed that their religion was the only true one. And anyone who thought differently was an infidel who deserved to be conquered or converted. This idea fueled a lot of violence and brutality on a massive scale.
It's scary how easily religion can be used to justify hatred and violence. And it's not like it disappeared after the Middle Ages either.
Unfortunately, no. History's full of examples of religious xenophobia. The persecution of Jews in Europe, the Salem witch trial. These events remind us that when we judge individuals based on their religion, or really any group affiliation, it can have terrible consequences.
Okay, let's fast forward a bit. To the age of exploration and colonialism, Europeans were going out into the world, meeting all these new cultures. Was xenophobia a part of that?
Absolutely. The age of exploration was a time of incredible discovery, but it was also a time of exploitation, conquest, and violence against indigenous people, European explorers. They often saw the people they met as inferior, and they used religion, greed, and a sense of cultural superiority to justify what they were doing.
So it was a mix of curiosity and a desire to conquer, partly driven by fear of the unknown and a desire to dominate. It seems like xenophobia can wear a lot of different masks.
It can. It really can. It can look like fear, disgust, distrust, even a sense of being superior. It can be fueled by so many different things. Religious dogma, economic anxiety, even just not being exposed to different cultures.
Speaking of lack of exposure, let's talk about the fear of foreign diseases. Didn't that have a big role in fueling xenophobia historically?
That's a fascinating connection, and often a disturbing one. Think about the Black Death, a horrible pandemic that wiped out huge parts of Europe in the 14th century. It didn't take long for people to start blaming foreigners for spreading the disease, especially Jews. This led to persecution and violence, even though there was zero scientific basis for those accusations.
So basically, fear of disease becomes an easy excuse to lash out at the other.
Yeah.
Not a good combination.
It's classic scapegoating. When people are afraid and facing a crisis, they look for someone to blame. And if that someone is already seen as different or threatening, it becomes really easy to just blame them, regardless of the facts. This pattern pops up over and over throughout history, like the cholera outbreaks in the 19th century. Chinese immigrants were often blamed, even though the disease was spreading through contaminated water.
It's like this broken record of fear and ignorance. But it's not just a thing of the past, right? We're seeing similar things happening now with COVID-19 and the rise of anti-Asian sentiment.
Sadly, yes. The pandemic has shown us that xenophobia is still a problem in many societies. Even though the virus affects people from all backgrounds, we've seen a rise in hate crimes and discrimination against people of Asian descent. It's fueled by fear, misinformation, and the tendency to blame the other for the crisis.
Okay, so we've seen how historical events and societal anxieties can lead to xenophobia. But what about the psychology behind it? Why are we so quick to label, judge, and sometimes even fear people who are different?
That's where things get really interesting. To understand xenophobia, we have to look at how our brains work, how we see the world, and how our experiences and the information we get shape our perception.
So it's not just about people being prejudiced. There are actual psychological mechanisms at play.
Exactly. One key element is our fear of the unknown. Our brains love predictability and control. So when we come across unfamiliar people, customs, or ideas, it can trigger anxiety and a feeling of threat.
So it's not just about things being unfamiliar. It's more about feeling like our own identity or security is at risk.
Right. Think about anxieties around job security, cultural change, even the spread of disease. These fears can be much stronger when they're linked to outsiders. It's a way of trying to understand a complicated world by making simple categories of us and them.
It's like that super protective parent who won't let their kid outside because they're scared of everything. Our brains are trying to protect us, but sometimes they go too far.
That's a good analogy. Our brains evolved to focus on survival, and sometimes that means being extra cautious. But in today's interconnected world, that instinct to protect ourselves can lead to prejudice and discrimination.
We need to teach our brains to chill out a bit. Easier said than done, I'm guessing.
It's definitely not easy, but it is possible.
Yeah.
One key thing is recognizing and challenging our own biases. We all have them. It's part of being human. But when we become aware of how our upbringing, our experiences, and even the media we consume shape our perception, then we can start to question those assumptions and develop more nuanced views. Welcome back, Deep Diver. Last time we talked about the history and psychology behind xenophobia, how this fear of the other has shaped societies for centuries. Now let's look at how xenophobia impacts public health and human rights, and then we'll dive into some potential solutions for creating a more inclusive world.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that connection between xenophobia and public health. It seems like every time there's a big disease outbreak,
Right.
there's also a wave of fear and blame directed at certain groups.
It's a pattern that keeps happening throughout history. The fear of foreign disease. It triggers something called a behavioral immune response. Think of it like your brain's ancient security system, trying to protect you from getting sick. But here's the thing. That system isn't always right. It can get triggered by things that are just associated with disease, like a foreign accent, even if the person is perfectly healthy. And that can lead to prejudice and discrimination, which can have really serious consequences for public health.
So instead of working together against a common enemy, we end up turning on each other. How does that actually play out in the real world?
Think about the HIV/AIDS crisis back in the 1980s. There was so much fear and misinformation about the disease. And before long, certain groups were being blamed for spreading it, especially gay men and Haitian immigrants. This stigma made people afraid to get tested or treated, which just made the disease spread even more.
It's like a vicious cycle. Fear leads to stigma, which leads to more fear and more disease. Are we seeing something similar with the COVID-19 pandemic?
Absolutely. Even with scientific evidence showing that the virus doesn't care about nationality or ethnicity, we've seen a huge increase in anti-Asian sentiment and hate crimes all over the world. This kind of xenophobic backlash, it doesn't just hurt individuals and communities, it also undermines public health efforts to control the pandemic.
So xenophobia, it's not just a social or moral issue, it's a public health hazard. It seems like if we want to create a healthier and safer world for everyone, we have to address xenophobia.
Exactly. And it goes beyond physical health, too. Xenophobia has a major impact on human rights. When fear and prejudice drive policies and behavior, it can lead to discrimination, exclusion, even violence against entire groups of people.
We've seen horrible examples of this throughout history. The Holocaust, the Rwandan genocide, xenophobia was used to justify mass atrocities. It's a reminder of what can happen when we let hatred go unchecked.
Those events are a serious warning, but they also show how important it is to understand the psychology behind xenophobia. If we can recognize our own biases and how fear and prejudice can distort our thinking, we can start to challenge those harmful narratives and work towards a more just and equitable world.
So let's talk about solutions. What can we actually do to combat xenophobia and promote inclusion? Is it even possible to change attitudes and behaviors that are so ingrained?
It's a complex challenge, but I do believe it's possible. It's going to take a multifaceted approach, one that addresses xenophobia at the individual, community, and societal levels.
Okay, let's break that down. What can people do in their daily lives to challenge xenophobia?
It starts with looking at yourself. We need to be willing to examine our own beliefs and biases and ask ourselves where they came from. Are they based on personal experience, or are they influenced by stereotypes and misinformation?
So it's about being more aware of our thoughts and reactions, questioning those snap judgments that we all make sometimes.
Exactly. And when we see xenophobic attitudes or behaviors, it's important to speak up. Saying nothing can be seen as agreeing with it. Whether it's challenging a racist joke or calling out discrimination, our voices can make a difference.
I've heard that saying, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. It seems like speaking up is so important, even if it feels uncomfortable or risky. But what about on a community level? What kinds of initiatives are working to create more inclusion?
There are some amazing organizations and initiatives out there working to bridge cultural divides and create welcoming communities. One example is the Welcoming Communities program in Canada. They focus on creating inclusive environments for immigrants through things like language classes, job training, cultural events, and community dialogues.
It's like building bridges instead of walls, creating opportunities for people to connect, share their stories, and realize they have more in common than they thought.
Are there other examples of this bridge-building approach? There's the Human Library Project. It's a global movement that uses real people as books that others can borrow for conversation. It's all about fostering understanding and empathy by breaking down stereotypes and encouraging face-to-face interaction. Imagine borrowing a refugee, a Muslim, a transgender person for a conversation. Hearing their stories, asking questions, challenging your own assumptions.
I love that. It's like literally walking in someone else's shoes. It seems like these kinds of initiatives are crucial for breaking down those barriers of fear and
They
misunderstanding.
are, and technology can play a role too. Virtual reality is being used to create immersive intercultural experience. You can step into the shoes of someone from a different culture and see the world through their eyes.
So we're using technology to foster empathy and connection. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
But what about on a broader societal level? What can governments and institutions do to combat xenophobia?
Governments and institutions have a big responsibility to shape policies and promote inclusion. This can include things like anti-discrimination laws, investing in diverse and culturally sensitive education programs, and creating immigration policies that focus on integration and social cohesion.
So it's about creating a legal and social framework that protects everyone's rights
Yeah.
and makes everyone feel like they belong, no matter where they come from. That sounds like a big challenge, though, especially with all the political polarization and national sentiments we're seeing.
It's a challenge for sure, but I don't think it's impossible. It takes political will, community engagement, and a commitment to equality, diversity, and human rights. And we have to remember that xenophobia, it's not just a moral issue. It's a threat to public health, social stability, and economic progress.
It sounds like addressing xenophobia isn't just the right thing to do, it's also the smart thing to do.
Exactly. We live in a world where everything is connected, our destinies are intertwined, and if we want to create a future where everyone feels safe, respected, and valued, we have to overcome fear, embrace diversity, and work together.
So we've talked a lot about xenophobia, where it comes from, what's going on in our heads, and how it affects public health and human rights. But now I'm kind of wondering, how do things like globalization and technology and all the crazy politics these days, how are those things shaping this fear of the other?
You've hit on some really important points. Those are some of the biggest forces shaping xenophobia today. Let's start with globalization. It's definitely brought a lot of good things. It's connected people from all over the world. It's helped with trade and cultural exchange, and it's even driven innovation and economic growth. But it's also caused some anxiety, especially about economic competition and cultural change.
It's like the world's getting smaller,
Yeah.
and some people are excited about that. But for others, it's really unsettling. They feel like their jobs, their culture, even their identity is being threatened.
Exactly. And those anxieties can be used by others. Politicians and movements, especially the ones that are really nationalistic or populist, they often blame immigrants or foreigners for economic problems, social issues, even threats to national security.
We've seen this happening lately. With all the anti-immigrant feelings and the way refugees are being portrayed, it's a pretty disturbing trend, and it seems to be getting worse in a lot of places.
It is worrying, that kind of rhetoric. It preys on people's fears and insecurity, and it offers really simple solutions to problems that are actually very complex. It creates a climate of distrust and division, and that can lead to discrimination, violence, and the weakening of democratic values.
So what can we do? Can we benefit from globalization without making xenophobia worse?
It's a tough balance. We need to promote understanding between cultures, make sure that everyone benefits fairly from globalization, and encourage people to see themselves as global citizens who are all connected to each other.
Okay, so more education, more fairness, and a sense of global community. Got it. But what about technology? It's changed the way we talk, get information, even form our opinion. How is that affecting xenophobia?
Technology. It's a two-sided coin. On one side, it's brought people together, it's helped with cultural exchange, And it's given a voice to people who are marginalized. Think about how social media has helped refugees and raised awareness about human rights.
It's like a global megaphone for empathy and activism.
Exactly. But it's also a megaphone for hate, misinformation, and fear-mongering. Algorithms can create echo chambers where people only hear what they already believe. And the fact that people can be anonymous online, it makes it easier to spread hate and incite violence.
It's like the Wild West of the internet. So much potential, but also a breeding ground for some of the worst parts of humanity. How do we use technology responsibly?
We need to learn how to think critically, how to spot bias and misinformation, and we need to hold tech companies accountable for the spread of hate speech and the way algorithms are manipulated. Digital literacy is crucial in this day and age.
Education, critical thinking, holding tech companies responsible.
Got it.
Okay, so we've come to the end of our deep dive into xenophobia, and we've learned a lot about its history, the psychology behind it, and the impact it has. But I'm left with one big question. Knowing all of this, what does the future hold? Are we just going to keep repeating the same mistake? Or can we actually create a world where everyone feels included?
I'm an optimist. I really believe we can build a better future, but it's going to take work. We have to actively challenge our own biases, promote understanding, and build bridges between different cultures. We have to recognize that we're all human, and we have to work together to solve the problems that affect us all.
So we need to choose hope over fear, connection over division, and believe that empathy can overcome even our most basic instincts.
I love that. It's about remembering that we're all in this together, on this one little planet floating through space. Our differences make us special. It's our shared humanity that unites us.
That's a great way to put it, and a perfect way to wrap up our conversation about xenophobia. I hope this deep dive is giving you some new things to think about.
And if you want to keep learning, there are tons of books on this topic. You can find them on Amazon Kindle and Google Play Books. There's a whole world of knowledge out there waiting for you.
So keep learning, keep asking questions, and keep those conversations going. Until next time, stay curious and embrace the amazing diversity of humanity. Thanks for joining us.